All right, here we are. This is the Nick and Joe show. Without Joe tonight, he's unable to be with us. We have Tom Harris as our guest host. Will be joining us in the second hour. But in the meantime, you and me, handsome. That's right, you and me. We've got all kinds of things to discuss, talk about, and get into. But I got to tell you, if you'll notice, the scenery behind me has changed. And the reason it has changed is because we just bought a new home here in Suluka. And we moved from the basement apartment we were in to here. And it's only a 6 block move. It took us 3 days. Now, to be fair, if we were moving like we did from Killaloe up north, it would have been a completely different process. You would have packed completely differently. Here, we were just throwing stuff in the back of a trailer as far as furniture and clothing and that kind of stuff. We didn't have that much to move, but the boxes, like we were only in that place for a little less than a year. And as we're loading, I'm thinking, how didn't I just get rid of all this stuff back at the farm? Where did it all come from? So over the last 3 or 4 days, we took possession on Friday and we started moving in. Today is now Wednesday, of course. So in that time, it's been opening boxes like Christmas. Oh, what's in here? Let's have a look. Have you seen the? And we're still missing things like where'd all our knives and forks go? Like we found the forks but can't find the knives, stuff like that. It took me 45 minutes to find the boom mic because I knew it was here somewhere.
Hey, listen, I'm just impressed you found the boom mic because last time you did a move, well, actually, you found the microphone. You hooked it up to the wrong bloody cable.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's right.
By the way, thanks for the introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm John Milkey. I own and operate blasttheradio.com. I'm just hanging out in your screen to make it look good, really.
That's right. To give you another face ugly than this ugly mug to look at. No, John is going to be jumping in whenever he feels motivated, and he's certainly welcome to stay. It's always fun to see who the real genius is behind the show. And I must tell you something, though. For those of you who are just getting here, I'm getting some questions about sound there, John.
Yep. So Twitch has had issues all day. I'm just typing a message right now because, of course, they won't hear anything we're saying. Twitch has had issues all day with connectivity. So I'm going to direct them to watch and listen at the Blast the Radio Facebook page or on youtube.com/Blast the Radio.
That'll work. Either way, there's no excuse for no sound. We'll make sure you get it. All you got to do is follow the links, follow John's directions because he's smart. He knows what he's doing. Me, not so much.
Yeah, no. Anyway, it's more like I'm covering my ass all the time.
Now, for the listener, John and I were talking off air. When I said
you're going to throw me under the bus here,
something about Frodo and Bilbo, he didn't know who I was talking about.
Is it Bilbo or did I hear that right? Bilbo or dildo?
Bilbo.
Honest question. Bilbo.
Yes, fair enough. I gave you an honest answer. And Frodo. Hello, Anne. So, and hello to everybody else, Craig, and everybody else in the chat room.
I'm saying hello to your dogs. They've been barking up a storm.
Yeah, I know. We're working on that too. We took them for shots today. That went well in one case, not so well in the second, but they're both survived and they're fine.
Can I do shots?
You do shots?
I'd like to do some shots.
So would I, but not the way they got them. I'd rather use a glass.
Fair enough. I'll stick to the water. All right. I'm interrupting.
Right, anyway, so I found out that John is completely uncultured.
This is not news to anyone.
He hasn't seen the recent. Hey, Woodenhead. He hasn't seen the recent Top Gun. He thinks he's seen the old one.
I know I've seen the old one. It was 100 years ago, but I've seen it.
It wasn't 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, 50. Was it 50? That came out in the early 80s.
Yeah, it hasn't been
50.
It's
not 50 years.
Certainly 30.
Yeah, 30 at least.
Yeah.
It's an older movie. Well, how old is Tom Cruise? He was, 1920 when he made Top Gun, and now he's in his 50s, so figure it out. He could not be 100, but it's not 50 either. But I don't even have to ask him.
1986.
Hunt for Red October, or if he's seen, who Sean Connery is. One of the greatest actors.
I know who Sean Connery is. Don't be stupid.
All right, okay, we'll give you that. But oh my good Lord, we have so much work to do to this man. Bring him up to speed. Anyway, so with all that said, we're going to have some fun in the first hour. And let me just bring up my little list to give you a taste of what we're going to be getting into. Let's see.
19. I'm not sure if you heard me, by the way, but the original Top Gun was 1986.
1986. I knew it was about
Yeah.
that. I was in the Navy. That's right. It was one of the biggest boosts to naval recruitment for the U.S. military. Dildo Trinity does actually exist. Yes.
That's what I was referring to,
somebody.
actually. Yeah, it was a Newfoundland reference.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know. It sounded funny the way you said it. That's all.
Oh,
But
is that it?
Dildo Newfoundland, that comes from a much more innocent age.
Yes, it does.
It's like when you hear that song about doodle doodle doodle.
I live in a pineapple under the sea.
Much more innocent age too.
You sing what you cut out on us. What was that? The
That's
SpongeBob
not innocent.
SquarePants
That's just
intro?
stupid.
Oh, I see. All right.
No, well, it's kind of sounds like it, but it's what is that? That one's it's sea shanty from. It's as old as Newfoundland itself, but
Fair enough.
there's a reference in it that some people, if they have a really nasty imagination, might take the wrong way. So, a Great Big Sea did a version of it, and they had to say, "Look, this comes from much more innocent age." So anyway,
pretty bad when Great Big Sea have to censor or put
that's right.
You know,
That's right.
disclaimer
So you know
before
who
this
they
done.
are.
Throw the man down, says Craig Armstrong. Thank you, Craig.
Throw
Yes.
the man down. There you are. That's right. See, Craig's on top of stuff. He knows his stuff. Now, some of the things I want to get into tonight, let me bring up my little list here. The raid on Mar-a-Lago, an update. Let's see. Fauci resigns. I want to know if it's time for Tam to go as well. And Fauci, if he thinks he's not going to be in the spotlight, especially if the Republicans take the House, is he in for a shock? He's got a lot of answering to do. I'll get to that. Student debt. You know what? I'm going to start here. Ben Shapiro made a point on Facebook or Twitter, one of the others, one of the two, and he said, here's a novel idea when it comes to student debt. Don't incur student debt if you know that it's, that somebody else is that you cannot pay for. And in Canada, I don't know about the States, maybe John, student debt is unforgivable. Like if you claim bankruptcy, you still have the student debt. You can't get rid of it that way. Now, would it not make sense that if you know that, if like this is a major financial decision, this isn't like buying a set of roller skates. Does anybody even use roller skates anymore?
Oh, hell yeah.
Do they?
Oh, they're making a big comeback right now. Yep.
Oh, okay. Because I remember taking girls on dates to the roller rink in Leamington when I was in high school.
Hell yeah.
It was a lot of fun. That's the one kind of skating I can do because I got 4 wheels on each foot. I don't have to worry about standing on a tiny little wide blade.
Skating I can do. Stopping I can't do. I'm the slam into the wall guy. Nope, can't do that.
I can stop, but I do it your way. I slam into a wall.
Okay, that's fair enough. All right.
Bam! You're gonna stop one way or the other.
We're off to a good start, Nick. We agree on something. Holy smokes.
Believe it or not, it is known to happen on occasion. But my point about this student loans thing is that in Canada, it is unforgivable. You don't get out of it by claiming bankruptcy. So with that said, wouldn't it behoove the people who are considering going into higher education and requiring student loans to kind of pause and think about that before you accept the government money that you know you're going to have to pay back? And if even because this is what you do when you're a rational person. If you're going to buy a $40,000 truck, wouldn't the first thing you want to know is, can I make the payments? Am I going to be able to fulfill the contract, in other words? And if the answer is no, maybe you're looking at the wrong truck. So this, I think, is an idea that more people, now I understand credit cards and credit card companies and universities and colleges don't want you to think about that because they want the cash. You're borrowing it to pay them for your education, for your post-secondary. But as an individual, the person in the middle who's, on one hand being offered it, and the other hand, somebody saying, I'll take it, don't you worry. You have to stop and say, wait a minute, how come, everybody wins in this equation but me if things go south? And how many times have you heard of people who go into a college or a university and come out with a totally useless degree? Now they're driving hack, or now they're driving, delivering groceries, or whatever it is they're doing. They're not in their desired profession. Like how
So
many
what
flower
Wooden
arrangements?
had just said that on YouTube, as a matter of fact. How many students are studying a subject that is completely useless or extremely specialized and racking up debt that their job could never pay off in a lifetime?
That's brilliant. So you would think that either the parents or guidance counselor in high school who has no vested interest, has no dog in this fight, would say, okay, if you want to go to post-secondary, why do you want to go? What do you hope to achieve? Well, I'm an artist and I want to make the world's best baskets. So I want my degree in basket weaving. Okay, what are the income potential of that? Like, how many librarians do we need? How many jobs do you think there are for museum, the people who gather stuff for museums? I can't think of the name of the title, but you get what I mean. There's only so many curators. That's the word. How many museum curator jobs do you think there are, and how many people are competing with them? And yet, if you go across the street to a trade school, yeah, you can borrow money to take that trade, but if you come out as, let's say, a heavy equipment operator, you start at about $25 an hour.
Oh yeah.
Your chances of paying that loan off relatively quickly are much greater than they are if you go through and get a flower arranging degree.
Do you
Okay,
want
or
do you
you want
do you
to
follow
be a
Mike
musician.
Rowe? Used to have a show on Discovery Channel called Dirty Jobs. Do you follow
Oh
him at
yeah,
all?
yeah. I was a big fan of it.
Yeah, so he's got a whole foundation, and his whole life now is dedicated to just that, to talking to young people, and steering them away from university degrees, like you said, in arts and whatever else that are, it's
Right.
nice to have, sure, but
If you got the money, fine.
but the world needs welders, and it needs, like heavy equipment operators, and he helps them get through that education, and that's exactly his point. You will come out of there. And I mean, like the jobs, you'll be turning them down. You'll be so busy.
Well, in my case, I have a daughter who went through as a fine carpenter, fine like a cabinet maker.
Sure.
She went through as a cabinet maker and immediately found employment. Now, there were a couple of things that benefited her. The fact she was female, so everybody and his dog was looking for females to add it. She was really good at what she did, so she's really good at what her trade was at the
Yep.
time. She's not
Yep.
doing that now, but I'll get to that in a second. But the bottom line is she had two advantages: really good trade, really good income potential, was a female, and could work hard. And so she got hired
And
and
probably
was,
wanted it more than most of the guys.
well, at least as much, at least as much.
Fair enough.
So, uh, but she since has moved on from that train, and now she is a stonemason. Her
Wow.
and her husband have trained themselves because some landscaper took them on and said, I'll teach you how. She didn't need the education of a college to become a stonemason. She just had to work with somebody who knew what they were doing.
Of course.
So now they're making great money. It's seasonal, but they make enough in the summer that they can carry through the winter, right? And that's great. And if they ever want to come up to Sioux Lookout, there's more work up here than you can shake a stick at. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So
Well, I think we're
anyway,
going to see a lot of that, and you talked about that in your show last week or the week before,
Yep.
about having to move to where the work is. So many of us are just sitting
Exactly.
around waiting for the jobs to come to us, and it ain't happening. I don't care what the industry is. I'm very close to the radio industry, the TV industry, and I see people being complacent all the time, just sitting around waiting and waiting and waiting for it to come to them. It's not going to work like that. We're going to see a lot of displacement across this country and across the continent or around the world post COVID.
Take Newfoundland as an example. Okay.
Yep.
I love Newfoundland. I love
too.
people from Newfoundland. I've known a bunch of them. They're great people. I mean,
Fort McMurray is where
there's,
you're going, isn't it?
well, I was going to say Toronto, but
Okay.
same thing. Who do you think built the CN Tower?
Right.
Who's crazy enough to climb a ladder that tall?
Gilbo.
No, Bilbo and Frodo actually did the climbing. He
No,
went up Mount
Stephen Gilbo. I'm talking politics
Oh,
now.
Gilbo. I thought you were referring to Bilbo again. Okay. Anyway, this is too much fun. But the bottom line here is that those people, because their main industry dried up, the cod fishery,
Yep.
and it was that was right. Oh my God! I'll tell you one quick story about why. 19, I think it was 78. The HMCS Marguerite was on the worst trip that a ship could take. It was called the Fisheries Patrol, or Fish Pat, as we called them, which meant you spent a lot of the winter months out on the Grand Banks. Guess how smooth and comfortable that is?
No, I'm sure.
It ain't, not at all.
No,
So you
no
bounce
doubt.
around in Canadian waters, and you might get to go into St. John's, which is a great port of call, port of call. And there's the old legend of the 100 bars on Water Street, and good luck on a pub crawl trying to make one end to the other. You're not going to do it.
You mean George Street?
Yeah, George Street. You're right.
Yeah.
Water Street's down in front. Anyway, the point is that it was a miserable trip. Well, there was a Portuguese, I'm going to say trawler, which drags the bottom and just scoops up everything.
Right.
And they were hauling in fish like crazy. And the Marguerite had her dead to rights inside our international fisheries boundary, and ordered them to cease and desist, and they just ignored us. So the captain got on the blower to Ottawa, said, look, I want to put a round over their bow or they're not going to listen to me. They ran into the Marguerite 2 or 3 times, collided physically with the Marguerite. And the captain was told, no, we don't want an incident. No, don't. You're not allowed, you are not authorized to fire those guns and bring these guys to heel. Because that's all it would have taken. Just 1 3-inch 50 round over the shell. We're serious. You better listen. So finally, the Portuguese had a full hold. They entered American waters. So it was U.S. Coast Guard cutter with a 5-inch gun on it, fired 1 round and towed him into Boston. You want to talk? Imagine being the captain. He was just pulling his hair out because he had all the equipment he needed to do the job, but wasn't allowed to.
Yep.
So that's a long way of saying this is what happened. A part of what happened, at least, to the East Coast, and not just in Newfoundland, but Labrador, Newfoundland, or BEI, Nova Scotia, all the maritime provinces went through this because they all had fishing vessels out there. So we were not allowed to protect our own resources. So the Newfies all said, you know what? There's no future here for us. And then they started going west, and they went to Toronto. They went to Fort McMurray. They went to Calgary. They went to all these Western cities and took their work ethic with them and their sense of humor. Newfies are some of the funniest people I've ever met. They've got no reason to be. They've gained nothing out of being part of Canada. They were the last province to join in 1949, and they've got nothing but a kick in the pants ever since. And socialized medicine does not cover it. Okay, they've had outports moved. They've had fishery collapses. There's just nothing good for Newfoundland since Joey Smallwood brought them into Confederation.
No, listen, and if you go to Newfoundland, you don't have to look far. You'll see the Canadian flag, of course, but you'll see the old Newfoundland flag. It flies everywhere. They're Newfoundlanders first, and they're Canadian second.
And I don't mind that.
No.
But let's stop kicking them in the teeth. So all of this to say that you go where the work is, because if it hadn't been for those people, those young guys, primarily guys, young men who didn't see a future in the fisheries anymore, with his dad out in the long liner hand jigging for cod, okay, go to Calgary, go to Toronto, and start putting up skyscrapers and oil derricks and working as roughnecks in the oil field, sending money home, there wouldn't be anybody in Newfoundland.
But they're smart about it too, Nick, and you know this, right? Like they'll go to places like my best buddy is from St. John's, Newfoundland, well, Paradise actually, which is Metro St. John's, if you will. And he came to the mainland to get his college degree, and off he went, and he's back home now. But his younger brother was in Toronto and worked in the TV and film industry. But he rented an apartment with it was 8 or 9 other guys.
Yep.
And they were all on different shifts and stuff. So they would just bank the money. And by the time they put, 3 or 4 years into working in Toronto, he's back in Newfoundland buying a house on the ocean, needs a few renovations. But I mean, it's cheap enough. He was putting on his credit card almost. It was like $35,000.
Oh God, yeah.
It's a brilliant life plan. It really is.
So to Christina is right on. Go where the work is.
Yeah.
And it's tragic when you see these kinds of, when kids get wrapped up Because if you walk onto a college campus or a university degree as a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old, green as grass, just out from under your mother's wing, and you're out there and they say, here's 500 free dollars, and it looks like plastic. Okay, just make your monthly payments and you'll always have cash. That's a trap. That's a very nice velvet trap, but it's a trap.
And so
And
to go
once
back to your analogy you started this conversation with about, a logical person is not going to go and sign the lease on a truck that they can't afford, except for the fact that a lot of logic is missing from people. And what they do instead
yeah,
is they want that truck so bad because they have this sense of
emotion.
entitlement. Right. If you're not going to lend me the money, I'll find someone who will at a higher interest rate, of course, which just exacerbates the problem. It's a
It
deeper,
does.
deeper dip. Yeah.
And
That just gets deeper.
you're right. Emotion trumps logic almost every time. It's, you know what? To come bring this to a political situation, this is why the right has so much trouble, because the right tries to use common sense, logic, and reason to battle emotion. And that fight you always lose. You cannot override emotion with logic because they're emotional. Therefore, they are not rational. And they is your opponent, whoever that happens to be. So if I was running for a council seat, or if I was running, for a provincial or federal seat, if I'm up against the NDP, I got one hand tied behind my back already, because
Yeah.
they deal in emotion, not logic. Otherwise, they would never hold the policies they do.
But that's
And
always been
it's
the case, right? This has been,
precisely.
in our country, you've got these liberal governments and they give and they give and they give, and everybody's, getting handouts. And then the
Yeah.
conservatives need to come in and clean up the mess. And they're the ones who are constantly, having to take away, and they become vilified for it.
Yeah, and it's this is where the maturing process comes in, and this is why mom and dad are so vital. Like, everybody thinks, well, once a kid's over 12, they don't really need mom and dad. They can, no, 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 because your development doesn't stop there. Just because you are physically able to take care of your immediate needs, like
Sure.
you're hungry, you can make a sandwich. You got to go to the bathroom. You don't need mom and dad for that anymore. You can walk to the store. These kinds of things, yeah, 12, 14 years old, you can do that. But the maturing process is now much more refined as you go through the later teenage years, about things like finances, things like, how do I deal with emotions? How is this going to, this is where mom and dad have to sit them down and say, something, yes, you can buy a car at 16. You can get your license and you can insure it. But what's the insurance going to cost you? What's the price of gas? How much are you making?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to make these payments? And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, calm them down, take them away from the temptation at the moment, like that shiny new car that salesman's working his tail off to sell this kid. And I've been there. I have been the salesman. Not long, but I was there. And I know how the game works.
And I've
So
been
when
the kid with a very logical father with an accounting background trying to talk me into a common sense vehicle, and me saying, oh, hell no, bright red, shiny new, and they're willing to
and it better
finance
be
me.
fast, and it better be a 5-speed.
And then I watched them tow it out of my driveway years later, or out of dad's driveway, years later. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's when your father just crosses his arms and he doesn't say a thing, but you can read the thought on his face. I told you
Oh,
so. And you know what?
uh-huh.
This is how kids build respect for their parents, because, well, like it or not, there's no arguing with them. So when you have people who are run on emotion, and there's one of the big problems in education, we're flying all over the place on the topic map here, but within education, the way they're educated now is they get them involved in these emotional issues like environmentalism, like transgenderism, like you name the ism, and they throw it at the kids when they should be teaching them mathism, and they should teach them readingism, and they should be teaching them historyism and geographyism.
Now, and you and I are going to disagree and butt heads on anything to do with transgenderism and that whole issue. You know that, right? I think I
Okay.
think I think it's a real world lesson. We need to be careful with the age of the students that are in schools, and sensitive to that. I think we need to give them an overall education, because it's real world stuff. You're going to go into the
It
real
is.
world, and you are going to encounter real world people who are transgender.
Okay, I'm not arguing with that point. My problem with transgenderism is, if we're going to make kids wait to be 18 to sign up to vote or fight for their country, then we should make them wait till they're 18 at least before anybody even breathes a word about changing their gender, because they're not
Why?
emotionally ready for it yet. They're
Why?
not,
Okay,
because they
so
can't handle it.
okay, so you're okay. Let's not make it about the student. What if their parents are transgender and they're not hearing that language? They're not hearing that conversation in school, and they're feeling like an outcast. Do they not deserve some sort of explanation? Do they not deserve to be sort of made to feel that, they're included? If
Yeah,
they've
but
got a
you don't
transgender
do that.
parent or aunt or
Okay,
uncle at home?
look, first of all, you don't do that by segregating them and calling them transgender. You treat each student the same. So when you have boys, biological boys playing football, you do not include girls who want to be boys. Same way as you don't include biological boys who want to be on the girls' swim team. Okay, you simply say, listen, we're not going to get into your home life, but in general, right now, we're going to treat you for what you are biologically. And if you need somebody to talk to, if you need somebody to help you through that, because it's a phase, it's a transition. Kids struggle
How
with
is
their
it a
sexuality.
phase?
They struggle with their sexuality through their teenage years. That's what part of being a teenager is all about, is figuring out who you are.
They
And
struggle for acceptance. They know their sexuality. That's
no,
born
I
into
don't think
you.
they do, John. This is where you and I differ. I don't think they do. I think it's been suggested and it sounds good and they're emotionally
Nick,
very malleable.
is it thrust upon you that you favor strawberry ice cream to chocolate? Is it thrust
That's
upon you that
okay.
you throw with your right hand and not your left hand? No, this is a natural orientation. It's
Okay.
not.
Well, look, I'm not saying there's never anybody who feels this way, and it's a serious situation. But let me ask you this question:
Go ahead.
if you had a 1967 Camaro, an SS with a 350 in it, and you blew the rod out the side of the block, how would you fix it?
I would take it to my mechanic.
Right. And you'd have the engine pulled and either put a new engine in it. You would fix the problem. You would deal with the issue. You wouldn't
Okay.
repaint it unless you burned it in the same incident. But generally,
So
you don't
your
repair a
argument is
car.
you're comparing a human being
No, I'm using a
to a
metaphor.
car?
I'm
Okay.
using a metaphor.
I'm
What I'm
listening.
saying is that you don't fix a psychological problem with a medical procedure,
How is it a psychological problem?
because when you are born male or female, there are only two genders, one or the other. You pick one, and you don't pick one. You're born with it. Like if we took 100 people in a blind test and just drew a blood sample and sent those samples off for analysis for DNA, we would know exactly to the individual how many are male and how many are female, because it's encoded in our genetics, and no amount of wishful thinking changes that. That's my point. So instead
I
of
will agree with you that we are born with male parts, female parts. But what's going on up here, sometimes people just don't identify. And I can't explain it, Nick. And listen, I'm born in a male body. I feel like a male. I'm lucky to be, blue-eyed, blonde, straight in my orientation. But that's just not everybody. And
okay,
why should we exclude them?
I'm not
And
suggesting exclusion. As a matter of fact, exactly the opposite. Inclusion, to the point where we don't separate people by their preferred pronouns. Okay, that's
why not?
segregation. Because
What does it
how
matter?
is it
What does it
that
matter to
you're
you if
doing?
somebody wants to be called Jill or John or
Because what
they
you're
or
doing
he or
is
she?
you are reducing womanhood in the case that you just mentioned. Let's say that a guy wants to be called Jill. You are
Right.
now reducing
Big deal.
femininity and women to a feeling.
Okay, you've
They
worked in radio.
feel that way.
You've worked in radio for quite some time. How many
I
times
did.
have you encountered people who work in radio who their on-air name is not their name at all? They've adopted a whole different personality. How's that different?
Well, I'm not sure that it is, but my point, what I'm trying to say though, is, and I'm not trying to be dispassionate and just,
No, and I'm grateful for this conversation, and I will respect
sure.
you when we're done with the conversation,
Well,
as
no,
I know
what I'm
you will
saying
me.
is, I'm not trying to say that these are not people. Of course, they're people.
Okay.
I think they're broken people, and we're all broken in one way or another.
So what? We can
This
fix this
happens
with
to be.
therapy?
Yes, I would
Oh,
certainly
Nick.
have them enter into some kind of therapy, just from the point of view of saying, having a rational discussion about first of all, what this is going to mean long term. Why is the death rate, the suicide rate amongst the transgender community at 42%? Why?
Because they are ostracized
No, I
and
don't
they
believe
feel
that
they
for a
have
second.
no way out. Yes,
I
absolutely.
don't believe that for a second. I think it's because far too many of them realize they made a mistake or were pressured into a decision with a little time they would have
No.
come to realize is not right for them.
No,
Well,
because
no, look,
they do go through that psychological evaluation before they go anywhere near a doctor's office for any kind of surgery or medication. They are assessed.
well, I still look at the suicide rate, and I think this is a disastrous situation, and that far too many times, maybe because when you go into a doctor's office today or psychologist's office,
Mhm.
what kind of mindset do they have? Are they someone? And this happens not just in psychology, but in teachers and all kinds of people who are supportive and want you to make that transition. So all of their counseling. The thing about a good counselor is they don't lead you to a predetermined destination. They ask you
100%
hard
agree with
questions.
you there.
Yeah.
100% agree
And
with you there.
I think too many of these people who are supposed to be counselors, like how many times have we seen high school teachers or guidance counselors? I remember one guy who was a bisexual and was raving how he wasn't going to teach the curriculum.
Okay, first off, he's not a bisexual. He's bisexual.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine.
That's
I'm not going to argue that point.
But Nick, all I'm saying when I say that, and I'm not trying to belittle you, it's little things like that that people of that community hear, and it makes them feel like they're not part of
Well, here's
society.
another reality. Here's another reality. Let me ask you this, and we'll take our break because
Sure.
I'm enjoying this conversation.
Me too.
But since when is somebody else's feelings my responsibility? As long as I'm not being intentionally inflammatory.
Their feelings are not your responsibility. I will meet you there. But we do have a responsibility overall in society, do we not, to be courteous and respectful of others?
Absolutely.
Right. We let pedestrians have the right of way in a crosswalk.
Hold the door open for ladies, all that stuff.
Well, see, on that one, I don't know anymore. I don't know anymore. I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't.
I got yelled at that for once. I was down in Windsor, and I held the door open for this 20-something college student. And as she walked by, she called me a sexist pig.
Yep.
And the 40-year-old coming up behind her said, "It's okay, sweetheart. You can hold the door for me."
You said sweetheart?
No, she did. She told me sweetheart.
Oh.
She said I could hold the door.
That's the thing, Nick. In that situation, I don't know what to do anymore because I will hold a door open for anybody coming by.
Yeah, I know.
Me.
I do too.
You know,
but
it's not because it's a late. Exactly.
So but it was just funny to listen to this 20-year-old empty-headed skull full of mush walk by me and say, "You sexist pig, you don't know me from a hole in a wall. What are you talking about?" And the older lady, realizing what had just happened, said, "It's okay, sweetheart. You can hold the door for me."
All right.
On that note,
let's take a break. Let's invite some phone calls too. We don't put the phone number on air often enough. We got a ton of people who are just listening to the audio stream on the smart speakers. If you want to weigh in on this conversation, we're not asking you to pick sides. We just want to hear your opinion. I'm John Milkey filling in for Joseph, I guess, tonight. Kind of
at least for now, yes.
Kind of an impromptu thing, but here I am hanging with Nick. Our first time interacting together, Nick, and I'm enjoying it so far. So 613-413-2217. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitch, and we're back after this.
Who says you can't turn the clock back? Experience the excitement of open-air flying and see Canada's national capital region like you've never seen it before from the open cockpit of a vintage 1930s biplane. Are Are you up for the adventure? Put on your helmet and goggles and strap yourself in. Book your flight today. Go to OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. That's OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. Ottawa Biplane Adventures. The adventure begins here.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting! I gotta do it again.
All right, welcome back. John Melky and I are manning the mics tonight. This is the Nick and Joe show. Joe couldn't be with us tonight, so we will carry on till about the top of the hour. And after that, Tom Harris from International Client Science Coalition. And he is a very bright man, has a tremendous wealth of information at his fingertips, and we will be talking to him after 9 o'clock. All right, in the meantime, then tell me why our schools allowing kids to identify as cats and putting litter boxes in class. They are? Okay, now that's
I've not heard of that. I certainly know that in an adult lifestyle situation, there are some people who participate in things like that. Yes.
Yeah, but
I've not heard of that in our schools. And I would be on Nick's side on that, because I already know how Nick feels about that. Yeah, that's a hard no. No, there's limits to everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, what adults do behind their own closed doors is none of my business. And if they want to think they're cats and crap in a litter box, fine, I don't care. Because how do I know, right? And I'm not going looking, so I'm not worried about it. Murray, if it is, I don't doubt you it's true, but I'd love to see a link. If you can either post a link or send me a link to send it to team40east@gmail.com, which is my own personal email address. I'd love to have a look at that, because that if like I said, I trust you, but I want to verify it. So
I'll just put my email up on the screen, Nick, so I can forward that to you. So it's
okay. That'll work fine. Yep,
clickable link there, Murray.
Yep, click that, and if that's the case, send us the link, because I want to see that. Anyway.
Me too.
So we kind of milked that cow pretty dry. I think we both understand where each other is on it. And I hear you. There's just some points I simply just don't agree with, but that's okay.
It's okay to disagree, but I appreciate you having a civil conversation about it, because most wouldn't.
You know what the biggest challenge is when you do this? Is having people confuse passion with anger. Like, I'm not angry at all.
But this is the whole raison d'etre of my radio station right now. I just find conversations are lacking, and the conversations we do have boil down to simply, I'm right, you're wrong, and I disagree with you, therefore, screw you, goodbye, I'm done with you, delete, block, and move on. We need to get back to differences and talking them out and finding our way to some sort of middle ground and consensus on some of these big issues that are in front of us. And that's what I'm trying to facilitate here on BTR. And I get shit all the time from people. And I think that's the first swear word we've had on your show. Leave it to me. But I get an earful from people all the time. You've got Lowell Green on. You got Nick and Joe on. It's conservative radio. Yes, those are the shows that are here right now. But I've also got weekend programming from members of the LGBTQ+2 community, and they get their voice here. What I want my radio station to be is a platform where everybody has a voice. We don't have to agree, but gosh, I want people to listen to each other for a change, Nick.
I totally agree with you. And that was one of the things I loved about being on terrestrial radio. You never knew sometimes you'd know who was calling, but I can remember several conversations very vividly with people who were passionately, thought I was nuts. They completely disagreed with me. I'll tell you one quick story about that. A lady from the Kingston area, I think. Cornwall, because her nickname was Anne from Cornwall.
Yes.
She would call the show. Did I tell you this story?
No, but anybody who's listened to CFRA for any amount of time knows Anne from Cornwall.
And she was used to dealing with the mainline host, your friend and mine, Lowell Green. And Lowell would listen to her for like 30 seconds. He's been at that for 40 years. He's heard everything they could possibly come up with.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he just shoot her down and cut her off.
Yep.
So I'm hosting and she calls and she's talking like a machine gun, like just trying to get as much in as she can before the hammer comes down. And I'm going, Ann, I'm trying to talk to you. She said, what? I said, slow down. Eartha Ann, exactly.
Yeah.
Slow down, breathe. I'm going to let you finish. No, you won't. You cut me off. I said, I'm not Lowell.
Right.
Okay. Lowell does his thing. I don't do it the same way.
I get that all the
Just
time, Nick. I get
calm
lumped
down.
in. Oh, you're just kissing Lowell Green's ass. And like Lowell had a good little chuckle last week because I said, because I disagreed with him on something. I said, no, and I pointed it out. I said, I don't always agree with Lowell Green. He goes, you don't?
No.
He knows damn
finish
well
this
who
story.
he knows damn well who I am and what I'm about and what I bring to the table. On some things, you know what here's what I love about Lowell. He's passionate. I don't always agree with him, but he's passionate and he's researched and he deserves to be heard. He's 86 years old and still gives a damn about this country in ways that so many people just they don't and they should.
They
And
just check out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to finish the story,
Yes.
when I finally got her to breathe, she slowed it. She's still talking
Kinda like me.
really fast, but she at least taken a breath. And I let her finish. And I said to her, now, Ann, yes. And you could still hear the tension in her voice.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, Ann, are you sitting down? What? Are you sitting down? Well, yeah. I said, okay, put your seatbelt on. She said, what are you doing? And I said, psychologically, put your seatbelt on. Okay. I said, I agree with you. You're 100% right. And she was like, because whatever she was trying, I forget the point she was making, but the point she was making, she was bang on. And I wanted to give her the chance to say it. Right. And then tell her at the end that I agreed with her. Nobody has a corner on the truth. Nobody.
That's right.
And unless you're God himself, you don't know 100% of the time what truth. We try to get as close to that as we can, certainly as media personalities. Like the idea is you want to be as right as often as possible and admit when you are wrong. But at the same time, she was just blown away by that. She had no idea what to say. I said, listen, Ann, you want to call? Anytime you want to call me, you go right ahead. I'll give you the time to say. You don't have to. I am not a guillotine. I'm not going to take your head off.
For Anne from Cornwall, that was probably better than winning like a big screen TV or some.
She must have bragged about that
trip.
for days.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God! He told me I was right. That's funny.
Then you get guys like one fellow from Montreal who's he just yell at you. He wouldn't even there was no slowing him down. He just wanted to call you every name in the book. I cut off. But yeah, there's.
Yeah, but that's just it. It's the irrationalness of that, and that's what social media has become. It's just people. I've often said, social media gave us all a voice, but it took away our ears.
Oh no! You know what? I don't know if you came up with that.
I did.
If you didn't take credit,
that's a John Milky original.
Right on. Well, make sure you quote that somewhere and put your name under it. That's brilliant. Because have you ever been in a conversation where you're making a point and the other guy's holding his breath, waiting for you to finish so he can, come back with
Yeah. You can see them. You can feel
listening. And how many times have you run into that? And it's really frustrating because you're trying to engage on some kind of intellectual level. I mean, you don't have the Einstein, you don't have the Peter Jordanson. Come on. You know who I mean, the doctor.
The dude there. Yeah, that
Jordan
guy.
Peterson. That's right. I got it backwards. Jordan Peterson. He's one of my heroes. But anyway, so you don't have to be at that intellectual level. But at least, consider what's coming out before. I had a friend of mine who was a world-class author. And he was interviewed by the CBC. And it was a disaster because he took a long time to formulate his answers.
Yep.
And there was a lawyer he was going up against as a debate. Well, lawyers, are you kidding me? They ate him alive because he never got a chance to finish his sentence and they were all over him. And I felt so bad for the guy because I knew what was going to happen. But if you took the time to listen to what he had to say, is very profound, very deep, and you could tell why he was a real intellect.
So
And
Joseph's a lot like that. Joseph takes his
yes,
time, because I had breakfast with Joseph a few weeks ago at his invitation, and it was my first chance to sit. By the way, Nick and I have never actually met face to face. I've seen you walk past my studio when we worked in the same building together, but we've never met face to
that's
face.
about as that's about as close as it got.
Yeah, and which is funny, right? But Joseph invited me to breakfast, and we're talking, and he knows, Joseph's cognizant of the fact that he stops and thinks very deeply before he speaks, and he formulates
Right.
exactly that thought in his mind. And he caught me looking, and I guess he could sense me, sort of, with my body language.
Waiting.
And he said, "I heard you. I just want to make sure I say this right." And
That's
I just
right.
respected that so much, and it slowed everything down, and the
Well,
conversation took on a whole other pace, and I
only
really
thing,
respected that.
if I could give Joseph one piece of advice, and I'll tell him this sooner or later.
You mean he doesn't
You
listen to
need
the
to be a
podcast?
little. Oh, well, let's hope he. Well, who knows?
Maybe he will
I'm not
now.
going to apologize for it, because Joseph is probably one of the smartest men I know.
He is. Very bright
He's
guy.
just, because of that, he does not rush his thinking. He takes his time to go over it, turn it. You can see it turning over in his mind.
Oh, yeah.
And the only thing I would say to help improve his certainly on-air performance is don't be quite so verbose. Don't take so long to explain a point. Try to condense it down. I once did an interview with a guy, and this has got nothing to do with any of the topics I had tonight. So that's just free thinking.
Well, you can
Free-flowing
blame me
radio.
for that, listener and viewer. You can blame me for that. Again,
But I was
last minute, Nick's like, "You're on." I'm like, "Okay."
That's
So
right.
I had
We
I
just
had no
roll
idea
with
where
it.
the show was going, and this is just me, disc
Guess
jockey
what?
boy. taking
Neither
the
do I.
conversation down. Well, all right.
Anyway, John Robson's a good friend of mine.
Yep.
And I had him on as a guest on my show late at night. And John Robson is a very intelligent man. He's a world-class author. He does documentary films.
Mhm.
He's got a degree in American history from Texas University.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this guy is as sharp as a tack. And he was on the show. We were talking about climate change. So he would spit out this long string, and I would say, so what you're really saying is getting cooler, not warmer, and we don't have much to worry about. I took what he said, he took
Yeah.
4 paragraphs, and I condensed it down into about 2 lines.
But you know what, Nick?
so
I've been in
ju-
broadcasting since I was 13 years old, so let's do the math on that. It's 40 years. And I still beat myself up a lot that I could have said that in a much simpler way. I tend to talk a lot
But if you
longer
don't
than I should have.
do that, then you because I have noticed, even with my own skills on the radio, I'm not at my peak like I was when I was doing it on a daily basis,
Of course
because
not.
there's a certain skill set that you
Yes.
develop. Your
Yes.
memory is sharper. Your ability to recall is better. The language you use is more clear because you're not practicing, you're playing. And what I'm doing now, I'm not playing, I'm not practicing, I'm actually in the game. But it takes me longer to get ready. I have to really think about what I want to say.
Well,
And a
yeah.
lot of
Plus,
times
you're at
right.
home and you've got creature comforts,
Yeah.
and it's a new environment for you too.
Dogs
'Cause you
running
just
back
moved
and
into
forth
it.
in the
100%.
background. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I get it.
So
I get it.
So anyway, but self-analysis, I guess, is my point, is absolutely vital in anything you do. If you stop self-analyzing and being your own worst critic, you're going to start to decline, because you won't see the little mistakes. You know that old saying out of hockey, if you miss one practice, you notice. If you miss 2 practices, the coach notices. And if you miss 3 practices, everybody notices.
I don't know that
Never-
expression because I missed all the practices, all the games. I was just not. We talked about that before too. I can't skate to save my life. You know what?
But
One
it's
of the
true.
one of the great lessons I learned, I actually learned by taking an improv class. They do a neat exercise there when I coach young broadcast talent, especially morning shows where you've got 2 or more people in the room.
Yep.
It's fun to reverse the roles, but what's an interesting exercise is to have them not say no to what the other person's saying. So you instantly take away the combativeness of anything. The task is, or the exercise is, say yes And have you considered this? That changes a conversation in everyday life. I hear you. And further to your point, I'd like to say this. People are much more receptive when you express things like that to them as opposed to, oh, hell no, right? That's asking for a fight.
Unless they're
It's just a neat little
blazingly
exercise
wrong.
from an improv class that I find really, it changes the tone of a conversation just like that.
Well, if you watch some of the really hot late night talk show hosts, like I watch a lot of Greg Gutfeld. I love his style. I love the way his delivery when he does his monologues, and I agree with a lot of what he has to say. But if you want a lesson on how to deliver a monologue or how to be engaging, Greg Gutfeld's about the best there is. And that says something, because one of my great heroes is Rush Limbaugh. He taught me, without knowing it,
Nick.
while I was driving truck in the States, how to be a talk show host. No, I know. Look, set aside whether you like him or not.
I know.
The way he ran his show.
I get that.
Yeah,
I get that.
That's what I was after.
You can make the same argument for Howard Stern. You can hate the guy all you want, but when you sit back and you break down how he performs, it's pretty spectacular. No, Rush, listen, why wouldn't you study a Rush Limbaugh? Regardless of your politics and regardless of whether or not you agree with the guy, he was at the top of his game. What got him there? You got to listen to that.
He plowed the ground for everybody that came after him. So anyway, the point is that these kinds of exercises are useful, but what they do is they also make you a far better. Yes, he is, Craig. He certainly is. It makes you a better conversationalist, because you learn how to have a conversation rather than a debate. Not every conversation needs to be a debate. I have a friend of mine who is one of the really smart, really sharp, knows what's going on in the world, all that stuff. And I watched him in 30 seconds absolutely crush a young lady who is relatively isolated from social politics and the political world. She made a comment and he said, nope, that's it. And just wham, buried her. I thought, why? Why'd you do that? You took a hammer to a fly on an anvil. You just don't do that. Let it look. You can maybe say, well, okay, I do what you just talked about. I hear you, but have you considered this little piece of information?
Right.
And because I've done that before, and I've led people in a complete 360-degree circle, or 180 degrees at least. They started out disagreeing with me. I got them all the way around to agreeing with me. I did take them 360. And by the time I was done, they were right back where they started from. I did it because I want to demonstrate they weren't thinking. But
yeah, and I get that. And I don't think in any conversation, I'm never trying to change somebody's mind, because that's a pretty gargantuan task. You're really asking a lot. You might change somebody's mind on a thing here and there. But again, for me, I just want to bring somebody around to be open to hearing another side of the conversation or another opinion. We're all going to make our own decisions based on our religious beliefs, our upbringing, our moral values, all these other things that factor into it. But just, can we start listening to each other again, listening to other ideas? The answers to all of our problems are somewhere in the middle of this stink pile that is social media.
Well, one of the things I've always believed is, if you can convince somebody to give up lifelong held beliefs in 5 minutes based on a conversation, they weren't lifelong held beliefs in the first place.
That's fair.
Because nobody does that. And Craig, congratulations, by the way. I am watching that. Good luck in that debate. So I'm hoping maybe this might help give you a few pointers about how to debate, instead of just don't accept their narrative. Watch Greg. You know what? Watch DeSantis' latest thing.
You love that guy, don't you?
I do. I'd vote for him for prime minister in a freaking heartbeat. I would do it. Like, I like Pierre because he's the best available in Canada, and I think he's really down to earth and very basic. And I like his commercials too. Have you seen any of Joseph's?
I've seen some of Joseph's political city councilor videos. Yeah.
You know what? He's doing some really good work there. So I'm kind of proud of the man. He's doing really well. and there's a few other people that are running that I know. So it's going to be an interesting race down there in Ottawa, that's for sure.
Well, it's
All
interesting
right.
too because you've often had, like your guest host Chris Fraser has
That's
put his
one of the
name on
ones
the
I
ballot
was
for
thinking
Orleans
of.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I finally met Chris at the football game the other night. So I mean, you seemed, and I thought about it. I confessed this on my own show the other day. I gave it serious consideration, and I think at the end of the day, I'm so comfortable in this realm, and I know I'll make a difference here. And just with my mental health and all I've gone through in that regard, and that's a whole other story and a whole other conversation. Go back to Lowell Green show yesterday if you want to hear that story, folks. But it's just, I don't know how well I would do with those who really just don't agree with the decisions I'm making, and the whole fallout from that. I just don't think I'm there yet, but I'm not ever going to say no to it. So I respect people, and I've told Craig this, and Joseph and Chris as well. I just respect people who want to be part of that process and put their name on the ballot and stand up for their community. And I don't. It's so noble. It's so noble, Craig. I love that you've stood up and done that for your community. Good for you.
It's an act of courage to put your name on a ballot. There's no question of that. And I respect everybody, no matter their political stripe, who at least at some level, because of the courage it takes.
And you open your personal life and your business life up to.
You are in for a rectal exam like you've never had before. They're going to be looking in every crack and corner they can find.
Touche.
You better, you know the best way to deal with that though? Like, let's say somebody finds something in your
Just
path.
own it.
Absolutely. Walk to the microphone and say, okay, yes, that happened. Yes, I was responsible for it. I apologized for it. Any other questions?
That was me then. It's not me now. Yeah, and let them do with that what they will. But because exactly what we're talking about. What they're looking for is an argument. They're looking for that combativeness because that's going to sell newspapers. Yeah. So if you just
steal their thunder.
Yeah, if you say, "Yup," well, then what?
I did that when I was driving truck. I did that to a dispatcher once. I was only late, I think, once or twice in all the 10 years I drove truck for a delivery. And he got mad. He says, "You were supposed to be there. You weren't there." And I'm thinking to myself, I was in the driveway. I had to wait for somebody else to pull out of the dock so I could back in. I was like 5 minutes late. But rather than argue with him, I said, "Yep, you're right. My fault. I'm the captain of the ship. If it doesn't make it dock on time, then I'm at fault. So what's next?"
Yeah, exactly. Where do they go? Where do they go from there?
Yeah. Because now you've stolen not only their thunder, but their fun.
Your next guest, your replacement for me, who's coming up. Are they calling in or are they going to join on the video stream, Nick?
They're going to join.
They're going to join via the video stream. Okay, so that's where I'm keeping my eyes open. All right.
Yeah.
We're at the top of the hour. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. Do you want to take a little break here, and you and I can continue this until your guest gets
until
here?
He shows up. Yep. Okay. Yep. Yeah, because I need a biological break anyway.
Well, do your thing. Throw the break, sir, and I will just get ready to hit the button here.
All right, you hit the button, and I'll do the biological thing.
It's the Nick and Joe Show.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
no fair. You got cookies. How did you get cookies?
You saw that, did you? I have the most amazing wife. And she said, "You can't eat cookies while you're doing your show." I said, "I can, so it's my show."
Oh, I guess it is too. Well, there you go. Change up the music for you. You like that intro too?
Oh, yeah. That was
All right.
cool.
All right.
Go back, Luna. Never mind, she was right. I shouldn't eat while I'm on the air. That's not the point.
I agree with your wife. You shouldn't eat while you're on the air, but nonetheless,
You know
you
what
are.
else you shouldn't do? Is drink Coke.
I haven't had a glass of Coke. I can't even tell you how long it's been. It's just because I'm big on drinking. My alcohol of choice is Pink Whitney, right? Which is
Yeah,
vodka and pink lemonade, and Coke just doesn't go with that. I used to be a rum and Coke guy years ago, though.
Are you a human?
Sometimes.
Or did you come from Mars?
Come from the Milky Way, man. Come on. You set that up. You set that up.
I know I did. I lofted it up there for you.
Hey, listen.
Well, you know what goes in milk, don't you? Tia Maria.
Yeah.
Yep. You pour enough in there, it'll taste good.
Phone number to call the show, 613-413-2217. Your texts are welcome as well for people listening on blasttheradio.com. Available on your smart speaker, by the way. If you want to sit back and just enjoy the show on the smart speaker, I bust Nick and Joe all the time. You got to talk about this more. Just ask Alexa or Google to play Blast the Radio. And a reminder that the Nick and Joe podcast, which a lot of you had been contacting us asking, where is the podcast? Where did it go? We finally got you caught up. All the past episodes are there. I haven't had a chance to get into show descriptions and explain exactly what is in each one, but the shows are there if you want to go back and listen in your travels. And tonight's show will be uploaded within 30 or 40 minutes of us being done here, Nick. So there you go. And that's available on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you would ordinarily get your podcast, or just ask your smart speaker to play the Nick and Joe Show.
And my whole part in this is to sit down once a week in front of this microphone and have something to talk about.
With cookies in your mouth.
Does all the other... And which, you know what? I have had, over the course of my years, I think I've had one show where I ran out of topics. Because when I was doing terrestrial, I would come in with 12 or 14.
I don't know how you do it. Like this is the muscle I'm trying to flex right now. I'm trying to, I'm not trying. I am every day I'm on at 9:30 and I'm talking and it's just me. And it's the finding the subject matter, the things to talk about that may be of interest to a general audience. Where do you pull this stuff from?
Well, you're just a news junkie. You get out there. And when I hate to keep going back to terrestrial, but that's where I started. I would read 5-6 papers a day. To do a 2-hour show took me 6 hours of prep time, 2 hours for every hour on the air.
Same on the music side of things. Oh yeah. I mean, you think I know every fact about the Backstreet Boys? Just like that. Took a little bit of work. Yeah, exactly. Well, them too. Yeah.
Oh, no, I haven't listened to pop music in decades. I don't like it. I never have.
The stuff that I knew as a straight male in my 20s, 30s, 40s, the stuff I knew about every boy band and every pop singer that was out there, like nobody in the adult realm should know this stuff. But I had to keep up with what the average 14 or 15-year-old would be calling and talking to me about on the request lines. But when you're a teenager, you're so into that kind of stuff. You remember Tiger Beat magazine and all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, I remember Frank and Mad and all those magazines, and I knew all about Queen and Styx and Supertramp and Foreigner and Boston and Boston. Yeah, there's a band. You listen to 2 songs, you've heard them all. Twin guitars, same harmonies.
Okay, Boston's a fascinating conversation. How long, or have you even realized every Boston album cover? What's on it?
A UFO.
No.
Okay, enlighten me.
It's a guitar.
Oh, okay.
It is. I did like months ago. I found this out. It's an upside down guitar made to look like a UFO. I never saw the guitar, and you'll never see a Boston album cover the same. I'm telling you right now. When you let me go find a Boston album cover. I'll put it up on the screen. It'll blow your mind. Okay.
All right, because one of the things I found out about Boston later, you talk about not liking people on a personal level, but because I enjoyed More Than a Feeling and songs like that. But they only had two. Those are the two that people listen to because the rest of it all sounds the same. They use the same twin 12-string guitars, and the harmonies are always the same. Unlike Queen, every song was different. You could have Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy to Hammer to
yeah.
Fall. You had the whole genre, and there was no better band in history in my mind than Queen. My son would argue Rush, but he's wrong. He's a young kid. He doesn't know any better.
You called me out on my lack of movie prowess. Have you seen
Yes.
Bohemian Rhapsody? Because I have.
So, are you kidding me? Of
There you
course
go.
I've seen it.
Okay.
It was brilliant.
Nick, I'm just trying to tell you, I'm one of the cool kids. I have seen at least that movie. All right. Can I blow your mind right now?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right. Look, here's a cover. I'm sure you've seen this cover a million times, just as I have. You're gonna flip.
Now I see it. I didn't see the head of the guitar before.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. All three of them.
And it's on every single Boston album out there. It's a freaking guitar.
Did you know they're hardcore vegans?
Well, Brad Phelps is dead now, isn't he?
That's because he was a hardcore vegan. I don't know, but I just when I found that out, oh really? Just not my lifestyle. Anyway, I like meat. I like lots of meat. But having said that, and we really should move on to something about.
Yeah, you probably should. I'm gonna back off and let you do your thing here.
Yeah, there's I get way too many things I'm interested in. The Cars. One of the greatest cover albums of all time was The Cars. The one where the lady's laying back on the Corvette.
Was that the one that had Drive on it? Their worst song ever?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't listen to the album. I just looked at the cover.
How many albums did you buy in your lifetime because of the artwork on the cover? I'm guilty of having spent a small fortune on those.
You know
and
what?
I rented a lot of videos the same way too. Ooh, that looks really titillating. And then it was like
I told you,
biggest dog of a movie
You want to bring
ever.
that up? You want to put that on the screen, or would you think maybe we shouldn't?
Are you talking about the Cars album where she's behind the steering wheel? That one?
No, she's laying across the hood of the car. She's in a see-through black outfit, got one leg raised.
I know the image you're talking about. I'm just not finding it, but I'll keep looking. Keep
talking. You don't live on Earth.
I mean, I could pull up pretty much any ZZ Top album cover and find that if that's
well, everybody knows that one too. But think of Farrah Fawcett in that red swimsuit. How many posters got sold because she was in a swimsuit?
Not in my room. Well, I would never have been allowed back into the house if that was in my room.
But, I was never into posters anyway.
Chrissy wonders if you're talking about Whitesnake. Because that was Tawny Katane was in that video, rolling across the hood of Whitesnake's car, which has been made infamous, of course.
Maybe it is Whitesnake. I thought, is that the name of the album or the band?
No, but I think I know the image you're talking about from the car. So Whitesnake was a band, and Tawny Katane in the video is like very, very scantily dressed and rolling across the hood of the car because that's what you do in the 80s. But no, the image you're talking about is it's one of the Cars songs. I believe it's from a single. It's not from the album, but I'll find it. I'm hell bent on this now.
I was never a big Car fan.
Yes and no. Until they came out with Drive, then it's like, oh God, drivel.
Look at the art. Speaking, since we're on this topic anyway, and we had no intention of going here.
No, now you're in my world.
Yeah, but think of the artwork. It was like its own art unto itself. Think of the album cover for Asia, or for any of the Styx albums, like Crystal Ball, or Grand Illusion. Pieces.
Look at the cover of Breakfast in America. Breakfast in America by Supertramp. Look at that album cover
with the waitress on the cover with the glass of orange juice on the tray. She's holding it up.
And what's behind her?
A city, I think.
Made of?
Oh, now you're pushing me. I don't know.
Salt and pepper shakers and everything you would find on the table at a diner. It's another one of those that popped up just.
I never looked at it that deeply.
You'll never see them the same name.
Obviously.
Anyway,
but Asia, with that snake coming out of the dragon coming out of the water. Prism had one song that was worth listening to, and that was Armageddon. The rest of it was junk. Oh man, you remember that?
Armageddon. I remember Armageddon just because, as somebody who did music on radio, it was 7.5 minutes long, and I got to go for a smoke and a pee. It was wonderful.
That's why it got played so much.
All that and it was Canadian content. Yeah. Our
man.
guest Tom is here, so I'm going to hand things over. We'll welcome Tom to the show. I will take a step back. Nick, this has been fun. Our first time interacting together, and thank you for allowing me in.
I enjoyed that.
All right.
All right.
Tom, welcome to the show. Gentlemen,
put the gin down.
Carry on.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
So pretty good. I just got in. I'm really dressed up for your show.
So am I. I got my ball cap on.
Yeah.
When I got my ball cap on, you know I'm serious.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, this is Tom Harris. He is the what is exactly your capacity at ICSC?
Executive director of the International Climate Science Coalition.
That's it. So he's the smart guy when it comes to global warming and how man's not responsible for it, to put it mildly. Now, we were going, John and I were just having some fun talking about a whole range of things, none of them scientific. I wanted to talk to you about this whole idea, what the city of Ottawa has been up to with this climate plan. Now, I do this. I know I have a lot of listeners who aren't necessarily from Ottawa. So let's try to, because if it's happening in Ottawa, this kind of thing is happening in other jurisdictions as well.
Yeah.
So I think it applies in this case that even though we're talking about Ottawa, if you're living in San Francisco or Louisiana or someplace in Europe, okay, it's probably happening there too. There's this great global reset they're trying to pull, and this is part of that plan. So we can talk about it, and it'll still be relevant to the international listener.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
what are they up to?
Actually,
give us an outline of what they're doing.
Well, right. Calgary just declared a climate emergency. Calgary.
Oh, no.
They're slightly bigger than Ottawa, and but they're going to spend a lot more money. Ottawa is going to spend $57.4 billion. Calgary is going to spend $87 billion because, of course, they all want to lead the world to stop climate change. So at the mayor's debate, they had a debate for the candidates for mayor. And by the way, is my audio okay?
Yeah, your audio is fine.
Okay, good. They had a debate, and they have actually 4 debates. They got 3 more coming up. We're hoping people can go and ask them some questions that need to be asked. You know, I went to the mic. I got to the mic first during the Q&A, and I pointed out that we had written a report, International Climate Science Coalition Canada had written a report about, about the infeasibility and the detrimental impacts of the climate change plan that they have. And, you know, their plan is completely crazy. I mean, it's going to have 710 industrial wind turbines taller than the Peace Tower. It's going to have 36 square kilometers of solar panels. And, you know, it's interesting, Nick, they seem to think that they can run the city without natural gas because recently Enbridge put in an application to replace the more than 1/2 century old natural gas pipeline along Saint Laurent Boulevard. And the city said, no, we don't think we're not going to need natural gas.
Are you serious?
And this went to the Ontario Energy Board. And sadly, the Ontario Energy Board, because it was just before the election, they agreed with the city of Ottawa. They said that there were other reasons that they wouldn't approve the pipeline. But so Enbridge now have this pipeline, which is more than 1/2 century old, and they can't replace it. And yeah, I can see Blast the Radio. Tom, where can I find written confirmation of this? I'll send it to you, Nick. It's all actually in the Ontario Energy Board website. If you click into their hearings, you can see the hearings and all the evidence that was presented. And it's really ridiculous because what's going to happen is we're going to have massive blackouts in the middle of the winter when we need natural gas the most. And I'll give you a good example of a soft example, actually, of what's going to happen to Ottawa. Back in February of 2021, there was a cold spell that hit Texas. And just before the cold spell hit, the wind died. Now, Texas is the state in the union that has the most amount of wind power. In fact, just before the storm hit, when the wind was up, they were getting 58% of their electricity from wind power.
That's
And
a
it
lot.
all died just almost virtually, just within a few hours. And as a consequence,
course.
natural gas had to make up for two things. One is the extreme cold, but two, they had to make up for 58% of the electricity that was suddenly lost because wind power was no longer working. And you'll laugh, Nick, that to please the green activists, they actually powered the pumps and valves on some of the natural gas lines with wind power. So not only did they lose the electricity they were getting from wind, but they couldn't even get the natural gas through those pipelines because those pipelines, their pumps and valves, etc., were being run by wind power. Now, here's the sad part. Not only did they lose billions of dollars, but 700 people died. Okay, the media aren't going to tell you that. It was in the Wall Street Journal, but very few media will tell you because, of course, that wouldn't look so good on wind power. But 700 people died in Texas, and that was a minor event in comparison with what's going to happen to Ottawa when it's minus 30 and we're reliant on wind and solar power, and the solar panels are covered with snow and the wind dies. So they're making it so that Ottawa will not be an attractive place to live. It'll actually be a dangerous place to live. They want to charge $20 for every entry of a private automobile into the city core. Every time you drive in the city core, you have to pay a $20 fee. And they want to do all sorts of things which, are just going to make it too expensive to live here. I mean, one thing they're going to have to do to raise $57.4 billion, they can't really rely on the federal and provincial governments because, how do you know who's going to be in charge that far in the future? One of the ways they could fund it is to have about a 40% increase in property tax, 40%, just to pay for their climate plan. And, there's some numbers that I think will kind of blow your listening audience away. If you figure it's roughly 60 billion, let's say 60 billion for easy arithmetic. If you say, okay, $60 billion, what would be the impact on climate if you support the UN climate models? And
Right.
what they concluded, and I sent it down to a guy in the States who works with the EPA's models, and he calculated that it's roughly 1/10,000th of 1 degree Celsius if they kept the plan all the way to the year 2100. They're only talking about to the year 2050 for their almost $60 billion. So you do some arithmetic and you say, okay, so if reducing the Earth's temperature by 1/10,000th of a degree would cost 60 billion, what would it cost to reduce the temperature by a billion? Okay, or sorry, by a billion, by 1 degree, by 1 degree. And this is relevant, Nick, this is quite relevant because at the mayor's debate that was out in Barrhaven just last Tuesday, what happened was one of the people went to the microphone and they read out these kinds of numbers. You're going to get a 0.0000 whatever degree change for your $60 billion. And the answer that came, I believe it was from Catherine McKenney, the answer that came was that Ottawa has to show leadership to lead the world to stop climate change. So you have to ask yourself, okay, if the world followed Ottawa's example, and if it cost $60 billion to reduce the temperature by 1/10,000th of a degree, it would cost $600 trillion to reduce the temperature by 1 degree. But the environmental activists say that we have to avoid, something like 5 degrees of warming. So what we're talking about is if the rest of the world followed Ottawa's example, we would be spending globally $3,000 trillion, which is $3 quadrillion, I believe, 3 quadrillion. And of course, it's all based on pretty flimsy science anyway. So I don't know, Nick, what the GDP of the world is. I don't know if there's enough money in the world to actually do this. So we better hope that people do not follow Ottawa's lead, because if they do, we'll be spending $3 quadrillion.
First of all, Tom, if I can jump in here, when I hear that answer, because those are all very valid questions, like how are we going to pay this?
Yeah.
And given the degree, you talk about diminishing returns. So to raise by to prevent a raise in temperature by 1/10,000th of a degree is going to cost us $60 billion. And you present that to them. How do you justify this? Well, we have to show leadership.
That's right.
Are you nuts?
Yeah. Well, they're saying that we have to lead. We have to lead the world, and that these other countries are going to follow. Now, the sad thing is that in this debate, the fellow who asked that question, he wanted to respond because China and other countries are simply not going to follow our lead. In fact, it's interesting, Nick. If you actually look at what's going on in China and India, they're massively expanding their use of coal for the generation of electricity. And in fact, here's some numbers that'll blow you away because we just wrote an article about it. India and China together are planning to increase over the next 2 years. They're planning to increase their use of coal by 700 million tons per year. Now, that's 100 million tons more than the U.S. is using this complete year. And they're going to increase by 100 million tons more than the amount the U.S. uses in total. So then you say, so what is the amount? What's the ratio?
That's what
US,
they're.
U.S. use of coal is one ninth that of China and India. And China and India are clearly not going to follow our example. So for those in the audience who actually think that we are causing dangerous global warming, the analogy would be this. It would be like you're in an inflatable life raft and you're puncturing it with a pin, and they're giving you hell. They're telling you stop puncturing it with a pin. Right beside you, somebody's using a chainsaw, and they say nothing.
That's an word.
Yeah. So the whole thing. I mean, Ottawa is leading who? They're leading nobody. Maybe they're leading other Canadian cities, which wouldn't really matter. Ottawa.
They are leading. They are leading. They're leading us over a cliff.
Yeah, exactly. And the sad thing is, Nick, a lot of these plans are not only going to leave us freezing in the dark, but they're also plans that are extremely environmentally damaging. They're extremely bad for human rights. For example, they want to have electric vehicles. It doesn't seem to cross their mind that it takes 30 minutes at least to recharge an electric vehicle, in contrast to 5 minutes for a gas station. So that's a 6-to-1 ratio. So you're going to need 6 times as many charging stations. So take the number of gas stations in Ottawa, multiply by 6. Where are they going to find all the land for all the charging stations? But regardless, if you think that you want to reduce greenhouse gases and use your EVs, well, you're going to strike out there too. Ronald Stein, who's a specialist in electric vehicles out of California, we interviewed him on our America Out Loud show. And he says that if you look at the complete life cycle analysis of an electric vehicle, and you count the mining and the refining and having to dispose of the batteries and things afterwards, they actually produce more greenhouse gases in their life than a standard car. The other thing that should really annoy and upset people is if they have a look at, and I'm not normally a fan of Michael Moore, but Michael Moore, a very regressive, whatever.
To put it mildly.
He made a film called Planet of the Humans. And in that film, they show the real environmental impact of wind and solar and electric vehicles. And I really encourage people to look it up. It's called Planet of the Humans. And Michael Moore came to the conclusion, essentially, that wind and solar power and electric vehicles are arguably the most dangerous and dirty, environmentally damaging energy sources on the planet. The other thing, of course, is human rights. I mean, if you look at where do they get the cobalt for the batteries to run the EVs? Well, the major supplier of cobalt is the Congo in Africa. And there what you find is that Chinese-controlled companies are using up to 40,000 children, small children, to mine, partly because they can get them into small spaces. And they're being subjected to terrible safety and environmental concerns. They're breathing radioactive dust. And so 40,000 children mining there under hugely bad conditions. The cobalt is then shipped to China, where, of course, they have very good environmental conditions. No, they don't.
Oh, yeah.
And some people are saying that the Uyghurs are actually, Uyghurs or whatever however you pronounce it. Uyghurs, yeah. They're using slave labor to help make these batteries. So, yeah, if you don't care about human rights and you don't care about the environment then sure, go for an EV if you want to spend $1,000 more to accelerate the destruction of the planet.
Well, Tom, this reminds me of an analogy when we were talking about the green energy plan. You talked about the pin and the. I think I'm even more basic than that. This is very much like peeing on a house fire. I mean, it might
Yeah.
make you feel better, but you're not going to accomplish anything.
Well,
It's
it's like putting gasoline on a house fire
yeah.
because the
Well, depends
destruction
what
of
you
the
had for
environment.
supper.
Yeah, the destruction, the destruction of the environment is huge. And in fact, if you look at wind power, for example, there are millions of birds and bats that are being killed all over the world. And sadly, bats are being killed at twice the rate of birds because a bat doesn't have to actually be hit by a blade to be killed. If it
It's just
goes in the low pressure zone behind the
yeah,
blade,
to
their
change
lungs,
energy.
their lungs burst and they drown in their own blood. And they're saying that some species of bats in Ontario will be driven to extinction. I have a friend who works in bats. But it's interesting. Some people will say, "Oh yeah, but cats kill more birds than wind turbines." Well, that's true, but cats don't kill golden eagles. They don't kill condors. They don't kill vultures. And the wind farm, the Altamont Pass in California, has been operating since the 1980s, and it's killed around 3,000 golden eagles. Okay, now a golden eagle might kill a cat, but I've never seen a cat that could kill a golden eagle.
If it is, it's a mighty mean cat.
Yeah, and so you say, well, what's going on? How can they be killing endangered species and get away with it? I mean, surely they go out of business because they get sued to high heaven. Well, the thing is this: the government in the United States, and I'm not sure about Canada, but they give them what's called a kill permit, so they can kill a certain number of endangered species, so that we can get this supposedly green energy. And of course, you don't want to live anywhere near one of these wind turbines because they produce low frequency infrasound that goes right through your walls, gives you headaches, makes people nauseous, gives them migraines. I mean,
Agriculture, farm animals.
yeah. One of the greatest way to lessen the property value of your house is to have a wind turbine built beside it. And I know because I have a friend in West Lincoln, Ontario.
I think though that the reality is that when you talk about this religion, let's say planet worshiping, they used to call it Gaia worship, which is just worshiping Mother Earth, right, as some kind of goddess. Uh, anything goes. They don't have any moral code. That humans are a blight on the planet. Therefore, if it's tough for them, then we got to save the Earth. And as George Carlin very famously said, the Earth isn't what's the trouble. The Earth is doing fine. It's the human beings that have the problem. And he's absolutely right. And I love his quote about somebody living in Hawaii wondering, how the planet's doing today while there's lava running through his living room. Well,
that's right.
planet's doing fine. You're the problem.
I still remember what he said. He said, "Save the whales, save the snails, save the trees, save the bees, save the planet." What? We can't even save ourselves.
But it's so hard. We were talking about this in the first hour, that what we're dealing with, and I think people like you and I, who are a little bit more logic based than your average environmentalist extremist. Now, I am an environmentalist too. I care about the land I walk on, the air I breathe, and the water I drink. Okay. And the same thing, and I care about that for everybody else as well. To me, that's environmentalism. But some people take it to such an extreme that it becomes their religion. And with David Suzuki and with Al Gore as the high priest of these new religions, then it's a dogma. You cannot question it. And if you do, you are now a heretic and you must be crucified. And look at what happened to your friend, the founder of Greenpeace. Patrick Moore. Not Michael Moore. Patrick Moore. I had the right Moore, the wrong first name. Anyway, the point is, he's been put through hell and back, death threats and all kinds of nonsense. And so does anybody else who stands up and says, now, fortunately, I'm detecting a change in the wind. A lot of people who bought this package to begin with are beginning to realize what a disaster this is being. Like, go back to the United States for a minute. Everything around Trump and Biden, a lot of it has to do with their difference on environmental policy, on energy policy. When Trump left office, they were energy independent. The price of fuel was around $2 an American gallon. Okay. Biden's in office 18 months later.
5.
Well, it's slowly coming down, but it's still, in many places, it's still up that high. Inflation's through the roof, and it's a colossal disaster. He keeps pushing on this environmental agenda, and people have had enough. In Canada, under Trudeau, people now know what the Green Set's all about, reset is all about, and a lot of people have said, now you still have climate believers, or as I call them, climate idiots. They're just complete, they live on another planet. They live down in the corner of Spruce and Juice and don't understand the impact. What they want to impose on the rest of us is going to impact them too, in the things like higher food prices, higher fuel prices, higher rent, higher everything. This is all because they accepted a credo that said, "Thou shalt bow down and worship with your money," Al Gore and David Suzuki. And I'm using them as the poster child. There's other people out there who believe in this too. But that's what's propelling a lot of this. And that's why I get so frustrated with it.
Well, and it's also creating a huge human rights violation across the world. The UN wanted, I was in the Copenhagen Climate Conference, and the UN wanted 50% of the money to go to adaptation and 50% to go to trying to stop climate change in the future. Now, adaptation makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's building dikes when the water is rising. That's doing things that are reacting to and planning for whatever may happen in the future. So adaptation makes sense. But the thing is, Nick, the big money is to be made in mitigation, and in particular by the wind and solar companies. Okay, so it turns out that across the world, over $1 billion is being spent every day on climate finance, and only 7% of it goes to adaptation. So what you have, for example, at the Copenhagen conference, the Africans were furious. They said, look, you people are all arguing about how to try to stop climate change in the year 2050. We need help today.
That's right.
For example, if the water table is lowering, then you're going to have to dig your wells deeper. They need help, okay? And if your home is falling down in the north because the permafrost is melting, in other parts of the Arctic, the permafrost is increasing. But if you're living in a place where it's decreasing and your home's falling down, you need help right now. So the bottom line is that these people are not getting help today because most of the money goes to trying to, quote, stop climate change. And, sorry, do you have to go for a commercial?
Yeah, I was just going to say, speaking of stopping, I'm going to stop you there. We'll continue this on the other side, and there's a couple other topics I want to get to as well. All right. Thank you for staying with us so far, folks. It's the Nick and Joe Show with Tom Harris filling in for Joe. We hope you stay right there, and we'll be right back.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
Who says you can't turn the clock back? Experience the excitement of open-air flying and see Canada's national capital region like you've never seen it before from the open cockpit of a vintage 1930s biplane. Are you up for the adventure? Put on your helmet and goggles and strap yourself in. Book your flight today. Go to OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. That's OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. Ottawa Biplane Adventures. The adventure begins here.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting! I gotta do it again.
We got some amazing comeback music. That bumper music's great, John. Love it. All right. Just switching gears here a little bit because we could go on and on about that topic for quite a while. But did you ever get a chance to see, and I'll tell you what the genesis of this question is. But first, the question, did you ever see the series Last Ship?
No, never saw it.
Okay. In a synopsis, okay, a real quick synopsis, it's a U.S. Guided missile destroyer. There's even a Canadian reference in it. There's a Canadian flag in the background because one of our frigates was tied up behind the ship they're using, and you can see the Canadian flag in the background, and they drink Tim Hortons coffee. So anyway, that's aside. Only people like me would notice that. But anyway, the ship goes on what we call workups, which is where that comes out of refit. Everything's been fixed. Everything's been upgraded. And now they have to go test everything. Now, it's one of the little problems somebody like me would have with the series. It took 6 months and they went up to the high Arctic to do it. Now, part of the reason for the trip to the high Arctic was they were dealing with the beginnings of an outbreak of a pandemic and they needed a strain that was only of the virus only found in the Arctic in Arctic terns. So this scientist goes with them. When they get back, 90% of the world's population is dead. And they're trying to find a way to stop the virus because it is blown through all their defenses. You could be a hazmat suit and you're still going to get sick and die. And it just wipes out 90% of the world. So when they get back, they have this big problem to deal with. And they have to find a vaccine that will prevent people from dying. And the way they do it in the end, and if you haven't seen, I'm sorry I have to tell you this, but they spray a crowd with an aerosol. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you know where I'm going with this. But that saves them all, who's left. Okay, great series, loved it. There was a few Navy problems, but I'm not going to sweat that right now in ship handling and so on. They did a great job, but anyway, it's Hollywood. So, but you sent me a piece and the caveat to this is I have no idea, neither from what I gathered from your email, neither do you know whether this is actually true. But the trouble is that science fiction, if you want to call it that, has a very bad habit of becoming reality. My best example is cell phones versus tricorders from Star Trek. Mm-hmm. What are cell phones if not tricorders? You know, think about the direction we're moving in light caliber weapons. And I don't mean that light as in small caliber. I'm talking about phasers and lasers and things like that we saw that were so futuristic in the 60s. Now the U.S. Navy is beginning to deploy them, okay, on some of their warships and aircraft. So science has a way of either following science fiction or the people who are doing science are feeding ideas to creative writers and having them included in their different shows. So if a writer for a script like a show called Last Ship can come up with the idea of an aerosol dispersed vaccine, is it really all that unthinkable? Now, never mind the moral consequences of that, but from a physical can it be done point of view, I don't think that's that big a stretch. We already do a lot of crop spraying, and it's the same thing, except the things you're spraying aren't human, right? They're insects and they're crops. But change the payload, spray it over a major area. So just so you get an idea what why I'm asking the question, and I almost don't want to think about the dark side of this. Let's take the vaccine that a lot of people didn't want to take. If the next thing to come down the pike, they don't have to inoculate anybody because then they can inoculate everybody without anybody knowing.
Yeah.
Am I really off the rails here, or does that at least make some kind of sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes sense in that it could happen, not that it should be done. But Brighton,
no, I'm not saying it should be done at all.
Yeah, Brighteon, the pro-liberty video community, they just sent out a notice. The headline is aerosol vaccines, in quotes, because they're not really vaccines, of course, being developed that can be sprayed on human cities. It says a recent research article reveals that Bill Gates associated researchers are now pushing for COVID nasal vaccines that could theoretically be sprayed on populations and inhaled without individual knowledge or consent. God.
That's
So,
what
yeah, I
caused
mean,
my
if,
tension.
if they're working on this sort of thing, and it's interesting because they're also working on something called global dimming. I don't know if you've heard of that, but because, of course, these people, Bill Gates and all these people, are so convinced that we're causing global warming, there's a lot of discussion actually about geoengineering, which is actually changing the climate of the Earth intentionally. And this is very dangerous because, of course, we don't understand the climate well enough. To me, it's kind of like giving tools to a 4-year-old and taking the back off your computer and saying, there, now could you fix it, please? I mean,
And expect the kid not to get electrocuted.
yeah, the kid will probably electrocute themselves and they're not likely to fix anything. So, I mean, that's where, of course, this whole argument about chemtrails comes in. I'm only learning about chemtrails. I don't have much knowledge about that. But the idea, of course, behind them is theoretically is that they would help cool the Earth to stop climate change. But the scary thing, Nick, is that if you really think about it, if we're headed for global cooling, which is what the Russians say, by the way, who study the sun, they say that the sun's going into a grand solar minimum around 2060, that we're going to see, considerably colder weather. In fact, the last time this happened was in the 1600s when the Thames River in London froze a meter thick. Okay, it never freezes now. In fact, they had frost fairs where they had oxen on the ice. So if you think about it, if we're headed there naturally to a naturally cooler condition, and then we purposely geoengineer cooling, then we could trip the planet into the next ice age, quite frankly. So this is very dangerous.
Yeah, it is. Whenever, again, I go back to science fiction.
Yeah.
In one of the Star Trek movies, one of the things that they would do is go around and adjust the planet by geoengineering.
Yeah.
That's how Vulcan was destroyed.
Oh,
if
right.
you go back, they geoengineered it to pieces.
Yeah.
On purpose. Yeah. Or being in the middle of a sun and messing around with the sun.
Yeah.
Now these are really futuristic and fantastic, and I don't want to be seen as saying that these things are very real and we need to do something about them right now. But we need to be aware this is direction that science is moving, even if it's still 100 years from now. Like again, going back to Star Trek, they're now working on teleportation. Now they're talking about molecules over very small spaces, but you don't walk until you crawl. You crawl first, then walk, then run. So
and Nick, this is one of the things that people got to realize is this is one of the reasons that we have to oppose the science of the climate scare. A lot of people say, oh, no. Like I was at the Strong and Free Networking Conference here in Ottawa. We had a booth actually, and they had a debate where they had different people on stage talking about what should be the conservative environment platform, what should be the conservative solution to climate change. And they accepted the fact that we were causing dangerous climate change and we had to reduce greenhouse gases. And I spoke to the moderator afterwards. I said, why on earth are you accepting that? Do you really think that we're causing a climate catastrophe? And he said, no, but we've already lost that war. So we're just trying to minimize the damage. Well, I mean, first of all, they never fought the war. They never really fought the war. You had a few really good speeches from people like Preston Manning, who probably gave the best speech ever in the House of Commons back in 1997 on the whole climate thing. He was talking about Kyoto. Bob Mills did some really good work, but then Bob changed sides, unfortunately. And so they've never really fought the war. And I'm very disappointed with all the candidates right now. I'm looking at Pierre Poilievre, for example. And I keep getting, like yesterday, I got an email from him saying, oh, instead of the Trudeau carbon tax, we're going to have carbon sequestration. Carbon dioxide is going to be pumped underground, which will cause a massive increase in electricity prices and accomplish nothing with respect to the climate. And that's potentially dangerous, too, because if you're pumping CO2 underground and it leaks, you've got, it's heavier than air, so it'll displace the air and you suffocate, basically. And then Pierre goes on to say, oh, well, we're going to be pushing developing countries to stop burning coal, to burn clean natural gas from Canada, to stop climate change. Oh, come on. That is nonsense. India and China have a need for coal. It's a very inexpensive, very effective energy source. And by the way, we should not get rid of coal either, because if you think about it, you store on site a huge pile of coal, enough for many months, maybe a year, I'm not sure. So your grid is very much more secure than if you're reliant on a pipeline coming into a gas turbine from somewhere else. So any energy source where you store large quantities of fuel on site, and that would include coal and nuclear, these are much more secure energy sources. So there's no way we should get rid of coal. And the other thing Pierre's doing is he's pushing for electric vehicles. So, I spoke to his campaign manager, and he wasn't going to say outright that Pierre doesn't believe the climate scare and he's just lying. He wouldn't say that, but he did say something to suggest that Pierre doesn't agree with the climate scare. And, so I think that, and all the other candidates, they're all now promoting it. The idea that we have to stop climate change. We need a conservative plan. Well,
even if every one of them knows in their heart that that's nonsense. What they're doing is they're putting their finger in the political wind, and rather than try to change people's minds, they're letting the tail wag the dog.
Yeah.
The reason why people believe this is because for years, the liberals, who were the leaders in the country at the time, were telling them it was a problem. If somebody came out tomorrow and very convincingly and over and over pounded away at the message and changed things like school curriculums that said, you know what, we're going to take the whole climate fear element out of talking about the climate, and that we'll talk about the rhythms of the earth. We'll talk about how the ozone layer fluctuates. It's not always the same thickness. So if it goes down one year and up the next, it's not the end of the world. That mankind has no ability to affect the weather one way or the other. And it's only our arrogance that makes us think that we do. If they would beat that message into people's heads for the whole time they were in office, not just say what they have to say to get elected. And even if you grant that, even if you say, okay, they're just doing it to get elected because they know that the attitudes are so hard on this, that it's going to take a long time to crack it, you still got to you got to have that fight. You have to draw that sword.
Well, and they have
never doing it.
They've never really fought the battle. And, it's interesting because, Nick, at our booth in the Strong and Free Networking Conference, we had dozens of people, conservatives, come by and say, yeah, we agree with you. What the heck are our leaders doing? They're betraying us once again. I mean, if you think about it, the leader, Andrew Scheer, and then O'Toole, they all betrayed the base on climate change. They all accepted and even promoted the climate scare. I mean, even the language they use, they talk about carbon emissions and carbon pollution. It's not carbon. I mean, good grief. Carbon is a solid, okay?
Yeah.
Carbon dioxide is benign. It's invisible. It's odorless. It's a gas. And carbon dioxide is the elixir of life. I mean,
absolutely.
The increase, and this is something really important, the conservatives just are not recognizing.
You still there, Tom?
One thing is they would intentionally lower carbon dioxide. I mean, you have groups like 350.org who want us to lower our CO2 levels from 420, which it is now, parts per million, to 350. Well, that would be an absolute disaster, Nick, because we've actually increased CO2 in the atmosphere and we've liberated the carbon essentially from fossil fuels by burning them. And this has led to a huge increase in crop yield across the world. Okay, we've had aerial enrichment from carbon dioxide. It's actually a very positive thing. And the other factor, of course, is nitrous oxide. If you accept the climate scare, you also believe that N2O, nitrous oxide, is a greenhouse gas. And so you have to massively cut back on your fertilizers because, of course, you have a lot of N2O being emitted when you do that. So you got a double whammy. The conservatives, by promoting the climate scare, are promoting reduction of CO2, which according to Craig Idso, who's from the CO2 Science Organization in Arizona, he says that will lead to massive worldwide starvation because we've built up the Earth's population with a high level of CO2. If we reduce CO2, we'll have much less crop yield. We'll have many more people starving. And the other factor, and this has now just started, is Trudeau wants to actually reduce the use of fertilizer essentially because he wants to see nitrous oxide reduced.
Well, first of all, let me interrupt you here for just a minute.
Yeah.
When you think about nitrous oxide, the primary gas in our atmosphere is nitrogen.
Yeah.
Another gas we have is oxygen. Now, not in the same quantity, but certainly, like, I think nitrogen 78% and oxygen somewhere in the 20s.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that two gases that combine to make nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas, by the way, you use it in the dental office, they use it in race cars to accelerate down the track. I mean, it's got a lot of uses besides just filling up the space between the ground and the sky, or ground and thing. All of a sudden, this doesn't make any sense to me. Just like the idea that carbon dioxide gas is pollution. It's not pollution, it's plant food. So let's talk about this idea about the in the few minutes we have left here on the show, what Trudeau is trying to do on the prairies by having these snoops go out and do water-based. They want a baseline so that they know when they're approaching their 30% reduction in the use of nitrogen-based fertilizer, and how the premier, I think his name is Mo, I think, is saying that any federal agent caught on Saskatchewan private property will be arrested. He's one of the few bright lights out there, and I want to give him full marks for it. That's how you deal with a thug.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, Nick, I just want to really emphasize this. It's a double whammy. You've got CO2 they want to bring down, which will cause reduced harvest. You want they want nitrous oxide to come down, which will reduce fertilizer. In Holland, they're saying that a third of all their farms will have to close. Now, Holland is, the Netherlands, is actually the second largest exporter of food in the world. Now, that sounds surprising for a little country. They're certainly not the second largest producer.
Thus you're great farmers.
Yeah, they're not the second largest producer, but they're the second
per
largest
capita they are
exporter. And so that's why the farmers there are going completely ballistic. You know, they're having protests that are blocking off 6-lane highways. They're setting fire to massive bales of hay. They're taking sledgehammers to police cars. You know, I mean, they are really, it makes our protests look pretty small. So, you know, what we're basically talking about is a drive to make food more scarce. And this will cause, of course, starvation in parts of the world, certainly in Africa, that rely on the imports from places like the Netherlands. But it'll cause us to have to spend a lot more money on food because there'll be less of it. So this is something that should really, really concern people. The climate scare is not just this theoretical thing that, you know, oh, yeah, they're going to bring in some sort of tax and, you know, we'll pay a little bit. No, they're going to bring in things that will literally impoverish our country and make it so that a lot of people in the world will starve who otherwise wouldn't. So the climate scare has to be attacked at its science. I'll just say one thing really quickly, Nick. People say, well, what about greenhouse gases? What about climate warming? We interviewed William Happer from Princeton University, and he did a very important study in which he showed that we could double today's level of CO2 or nitrous oxide, and it would have virtually no effect on temperature. Very, very little effect. And so, I mean, even their excuse that it's a greenhouse gas, we have to reduce it to save the climate, even that is complete nonsense. I mean, you know, literally, we could go from 420 today to 840 and in CO2, and it would be nothing but positive things happen. Nothing but positive, because the plants love it. I mean, they evolved at a time when CO2 was much, much higher than today. That's why they pumped CO2 into greenhouses. And we're already finding that parts of the world that previously were too dry to grow plants are now being used to grow plants. And they can now harvest in areas. The Sahara Desert is shrinking because of increased CO2. So we want to continue to boost CO2. We don't want to stop it. And certainly getting rid of a third of our fertilizer, my God, you know, this is really deadly. This is serious.
Yeah, this is another reason why. This is another reason why Trudeau has to go.
Yeah,
and anybody who thinks like him.
I'm going to say one thing here that's going to make your head sort of roll. If I had a choice, this is what people will say to me in the Conservative Party. Well, we have to support the climate scare, otherwise we'll lose in the election. Do you want Trudeau to stay as prime minister? And you know what my answer to them is? If I have a choice between a strong, principled, conservative opposition who will stand up against the climate scare and do what's good for Canada and bring up the important real points in the House of Commons, or a conservative party that kind of moves over to the left and becomes pseudo-liberal and becomes government, and then nobody in the House of Commons brings up reality. I would rather they lost. I'd rather they lost and were principled conservatives standing up for Canadians and standing against the climate scare than just simply become a pseudo-liberal government when nobody in the House of Commons is going to oppose the climate scare. So yeah, I would like to see them lose if they're going to just be pseudo-liberals.
Well, yeah, to me the problem is that climate isn't the only issue we have to deal with. That Justin is the root of. Well, I won't say he's the root of the climate problem, but he certainly is trying to expand the size of the tree that grows from that root.
Yeah.
There are other issues that need to be dealt with that nobody else will deal with. Economics, taxes, you name it. But a lot of it, the bottom line is the biggest issue right now in this country isn't so much who sits on the throne of power. It's who's going to reduce the cost of energy, because energy is everything. That's why third world countries are third world countries, because they do not have reliable low cost energy. You want to help Africa? Put up coal-fired power plants that are, liquefied coal powered plants, or put up energy from waste plants or anything, but get them cheap electricity, and that will help them go from third to second to first world countries.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why India is hugely expanding its coal usage. I mean, it's really quite amazing, Nick. Believe it or not, while the United States is cutting back on their coal use in their own coal stations, last year, and this will blow your mind, last year, they increased the amount of coal that's being shipped to China by more than 600%. Okay, wow. 600% rise in the amount of coal being shipped to China, who will then burn it in their coal stations to produce electricity, to make wind power, to make turbines and solar panels to sell back to the United States.
I don't think that's right.
It's totally insane. It's completely insane. And this is going to cripple the United States, getting them off of a cheap source of power. So they have to buy solar and wind from China, which is making it with coal.
Not if Trump's the prime minister. I wish. Not if Trump was the president. If he runs, you know what? We're out of time. We're literally out of time. But I'll say this: the one ticket that has not been mentioned yet that I've heard of is have Trump as the president and DeSantis as the VP. That would, to me, that's the perfect ticket, because then when Trump's finished, he'll be almost 80. He'll almost be like Sleepy Joe. It'd be time for him to retire. And now you've got somebody who's got some experience. He's already a proven leader, and he's not afraid to take on anybody, step in and win the next election for president of the United States. And that would do the world a tremendous good. Tom, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure talking to you again. And I certainly encourage you to keep up the good work over at ICSC and with your radio show. Good luck with that. And thank you again for being here. To all the rest of you, for Joseph and myself, I wish you all a good night. We'll see you all again next Wednesday. And with that said, we'll sign off. Ubiqueritas et amor, Deo sibi est. Good evening, God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.